Yaz, you came across the red light recently, and you mentioned something about having back pain. And do you mind telling us about your initial experience with it and how it fixed your
Yeah,
pain?
yeah. So red light has been interesting. I heard about it a very long time ago, and I thought it was one of those, like, we're all pretty much jaded already with all the bombardment of information, and this works, and this is the way, and try this. And at the end of the day, it all costs you money, and then I buy it, I'm out of the cash, and it doesn't work. So I think that, like, that's why this whole group, or this whole idea, is very interesting, because it's not just what works for me. It's like, you guys kind of try it and we share feedback, and then it's like, okay, we all got similar results, there might be something there.
Hmm.
So with red light, I kind of looked into it, and originally the way it was kind of discovered, it was NASA um, used it to grow plants in space. So that's pretty interesting, because there is no sunlight in space, and um, the guys in space noticed that their hands were heating quicker when exposed to this light from just pains or inflammation or anything, and the plants were growing. So that's how it all started. It was actually in the space program. Now, if you know anything about life, and you could go to the beginning of time, and perhaps how it all started with light. It just did. Everything on planet Earth started with light. Give water and light, and you have bacteria, and then you have different mutations that come from that. So I think that one of the things that is also very important for people who are looking for many different therapies and diets and stuff to try, understand that you could get all that right, and if you're not in harmony with light or the sun or nature, you're just, nothing's really going to work for you. So I think it's a huge priority, or at least it makes very much logical sense to me. I think a lot of the stuff is very logical, to start with the basics. And it just happens to be that red light really impacts mitochondrial health. Mitochondria is the mother of everything. It's the cell, the nucleus of the cell, that produces ATP, and obviously ATP then produces energy. If you do not have light, there's no way you're going to stimulate mitochondria. And this is very scientific. A lot of different people out there have spoken on the subject. For a more in-depth dive into that, you guys could search that out. But what I noticed is, and I'm a very skeptical guy. I've tried it all. I've spent my money on everything. I've gone anywhere, and once again, never really seeing any effects. First day I did it, I felt something. Second day, my back pain was completely gone. And this is for a skeptic. So it's like, I didn't even believe that this could possibly work, which wouldn't even make me part of the placebo, because we all know that placebo is very, it's very important. It accounts for almost 15% of results in a clinical setting. So
yeah, it makes a difference.
Being a skeptic, placebo, and all that taken into account, I realized that there was something there, because my back pain was gone. Now I have 2 herniated discs. I've lived with this chronic issue forever, and no matter what you do, or the more you do, it just exacerbates the issue. And this red light gave me that back, and that just opened up a whole new world for me of understanding why is it that the light had such an impact. And here we are, obviously. But yeah, that's my take on red light.
So red light for sure can impact everybody, right?
I mean, once again, I don't want to say it could impact anybody, but I know that we all come from light. Sun is very important. There is no life on Earth without it. So as much as I don't have the scientific, and this is the other thing that I want to mention on scientific stuff, guys, is like, a lot of science has been bought and paid for. So science is really not to be trusted. I think the only way you can really trust anything nowadays is if you try it and it works for you. Because even if science says it works for someone in a lab, it's not you in that lab. So
exactly. But I feel that a lot of that we're doing, a lot of the things that we're experimenting with, I feel like it does work. And I haven't tried as much as you have yet, but I've definitely tried a good half of it, and most of it is bullshit. And this has been the closest thing to truth, because a lot of times people, what they want is they want a quick fix. Sometimes it's not the case. But this, like you said, the red light, day one, you already felt something.
yeah,
You ran with it, and look at you now. You actually look.
So it turns out that the reason why I think, and you know, and you could, there's a lot more people that are experts like Huberman that people could search out. We'll probably post a video of him saying something to the effect of what we're talking about. Circadian rhythm is very important. What determines circadian rhythm is your photo sensing eyes, which pretty much means light sensing eyes, orient itself with the light outside. So you need to get your eyes need to see the light to where you're at to know what time it is. And that's pretty much what organizes your circadian rhythm. If you guys, and usually we're out when the sun is rising to see that red light. It's more orange than red, to be honest.
Right.
But
The red light mimics it a little bit. So now
it's high dosage of that light that you see when the sun's coming up.
Right.
So in my opinion, the fact that we're really so starved from that, and perhaps even have blue light toxicity from so much of the devices that we use nowadays, when we get the medicine of light from the red light panel, it just automatically starts I mean,
right, because a lot of us are enclosed, like
it starts getting you in sync with the circadian rhythm. When you start
so I've noticed that as well, because since I've been using the panel, I've been noticing that I've always slept good, but I fall asleep faster, deeper. But then my wake up is quick, like, all right, I gotta go. As opposed to, give me 5 more minutes in bed, that lag.
And that's the other big thing I noticed. So if there's a circadian rhythm chart that we'll find it and we'll link up, that pretty much talks about what's happening in every hour of the day. Very interesting. And cortisol is usually going to be the highest in the morning, in the waking hours, with blood pressure. So here's why this is such a big fucking deal, man. Like it blew my mind, and I've missed it for 43 years, to be honest.
It really is. It really is. I think this is that 20% effort that gives you 80% results.
Yes. And it's funny because all you have to do is stand outside and watch the sunrise. Technically. Now we've been deprived of it for many years because we live inside, we wake up late, we're tired, so we try to get every sleep that we can. We're blue light toxicity because we're always on our devices till late, watching LED TVs, the monitors in our cars, the monitors on our computers, et cetera, et cetera.
Everything.
Right? So your circadian rhythm is completely out of whack. So it don't matter if you go carnivore, it don't matter if you go vegan, it don't matter if you go anything. If that's out of whack, nothing's gonna work for you because you're not in sync. So this is, in my opinion, the most important thing to get right for a beginner. You have
the holy grail of health.
Yes, you have to start with first step. You can't, you gotta crawl before you walk. You gotta walk before you run.
Yeah, and if your circadian rhythm is in the shitter, your hormones can't rebalance.
Correct. And for those listening in, we got our expert pharmacist Julio here speaking, doctor in pharmacy. So another one of our biohackers.
But nonetheless, and something I've noticed too, something that I want to actually tell you guys, I've read almost every book that has anything to do with biohacks, and none of them, I tell you, none of them have hit what we're talking about. They try to get you to take biotin, do this,
and
do it.
There's a doctor out there by the name of Jack Cruz, which he's a neuroscientist, very, very interesting guy. He's a contrarian to everybody that's out there right now selling the supplements. He's a contrarian to everybody right now selling bullshit, selling diets, selling fads, selling this, selling that. And he's saying, if you guys do not get the light part right, you guys are not going to get anything right. And it just happens, in my opinion, to be that he is right. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the only way, but this is, in my opinion, one of the first things people need to get organized. And it starts by getting up early so you could watch at least the sunrise, or you wake up early and invest in a red light panel so you could get it at higher doses. And that alone is going to improve your sleep. And you can look at any guru online, any trainer, anybody that's out there right now. And the one thing that they all kind of agree in is that the better their sleep is, the better their muscle repair, the better they feel the next day, the higher the testosterone goes. So once again, coming back to what Julio was talking about, your hormones get optimized when you get this light or circadian rhythm stuff right. So in my opinion is the first step for anybody to take. And it's relatively easy. You don't even have to change eating habits. You don't have to start doing anything. You just have to have the want and the interest to obviously.
I fixed myself just by fixing my sleep.
Yes. Sleep is, in my opinion, the biggest thing. And the biggest thing that affects your sleep is circadian rhythm. And what I've recently come to discover, the biggest thing that affects circadian rhythm is exposure to light.
Just going to ask about that. So let's talk about that. The importance of maintaining a healthy circadian rhythm, how red light can help us restore that in a blue light heavy world. And aside from the red light, other tools we could use to minimize or, at least shield ourselves from blue light exposure.
I mean, blue light blockers are definitely something that everybody should have. This pretty much keeps you, exposed. It reduces exposure. For example, I have a window next to my office here, so I lift up the window. You want to mix in as much daylight as you possibly can with your surroundings. That really helps. Another thing that I learned, I have what's called low OE glass in my house. It's the best technology for impact windows. But the problem with that is I get no UV rays in my house. I get absolutely nothing. I'll get the light, but I get no benefit from the light. It blocks that out, which nowadays, arguably, anybody in a house, if it has upgraded windows, even if you sit by the window, you're not getting any of the benefits of the spectrum of the sun. So, and contrary to popular belief, the sun does not cause skin cancer. That is a lie.
Yeah, no. In fact, certain sunscreen is actually what causes.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole, right? So we can talk about how the modern diet and seed oils and how all of that we'll get into
that in another episode, because here let's stick to red light and fasting, because if not, we're gonna fucking go all over the place, man.
So red light and fasting, right? So you talked about how red light is life changing and whatnot, and how circadian rhythm is important. It's also important to mix in the natural sunlight if we can, where possible, right? There's a lot of people who live in parts of the world where they're not going to get a lot of sunlight, right? Some people live in Europe and maybe parts of Alaska, where it's just hard to get natural sunlight. So maybe talk about how red light therapy can really benefit these people.
Well, just think about it. It is very well known that in these up north or low sunlight places, there's something called seasonal affective disorder, which is pretty much, or SAD, which is a form of depression. So I'm not going to sit here and argue that all depression is caused by lack of light, but I can guarantee that if you get the right spectrum of light, that a lot of it will perhaps correct itself, because we just talked about how red light or light in its own, sunlight, really impacts hormonal health. So definitely when you're up north, you should still get up. and watch the sunrise. So here's the thing from what I gathered in my research. Even if the sun is not to be seen, but you get up at sunrise, you're still getting the benefits through the clouds. And it's still doing what it needs to do for your circadian rhythm.
Really? I did not know that.
Yes, you still get the spectrums of light through the cloud. And anybody that's been out on a cloudy day and you're like, man, it was cloudy and I got a sunburn, or anybody who's been in a cold place where there is no sun and ends up getting sunburn will attest to this. So
Yeah, that is true. Now that you say that, I do
Yeah,
remember.
that happened to me one time. I got sunburned, or there was no sun.
correct. So remember, that's why in these red light panels we have infrared light, because there's stuff that and you don't see this infrared light. The sun, these panels are mimicking spectrums of the sun that have been found to be extremely beneficial for us as humans. They just took it and took out the supposedly cancer-causing spectrum of it. You know.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's talk about red light, right? Because semantics are important. There's lots of, I mean, if you Google red light therapy, you'll stumble upon a bunch of things. So any specific things that folks that are out there should look for in red light therapy or in the panel itself, certain characteristics, etc.?
Yes, the sun doesn't have flicker rate. Fortunately, for us that have red panels, anything that you plug into an outlet, although LEDs have been great and now allows us to have these panels inside our houses, et cetera, does come with a drawback. And the drawback is that a lot of people have just produced or mass produced these cheap panels, but these panels come at a cost because they have a very high flicker rate. So you want to make sure that you have the lowest flicker rate in the market. And the equipment to test this has to be the appropriate one. There's another gentleman out there that tests it, and a lot of the manufacturers, they don't actually test the panel. They send the light out to the to the third-party testers, and they test the light, and it comes. Everything is skewed. You got to test the light in its entire when it's completely put together with the appropriate equipment to get what your flicker rate is, and obviously low EMF. You're always going to have some EMF in anything that's plugged up to an electrical outlet, but you do want to make sure that it's as low as possible, and the flicker rate, most importantly, is as low as possible. Reason for the flicker rate is that the sun doesn't flicker. So even though you don't see the light flickering, if anybody has ever been in a car and it's been, they've recorded the dashboard or anything and it's equipped with LEDs, when you play back that video, you'll see that the lights flicker in the video, or even car headlights flicker. That is exactly what's happening inside your brain. Now, luckily, if anybody possibly has seizures or anything like that, that could, if the light is a high flicker, could trigger that, because the brain still interprets it as flickering. So, and then obviously that could stimulate different parts in your brain and nervous system that are not beneficial. So the lower the flicker rate, the more important. And then obviously that you have the correct spectrums of light, which I don't know off of the top of my head, but we could add that in. There's several different spectrums that you definitely want to make sure you get in. But low flicker rate and low EMF will be the top, which, you know, nowadays most of what they saw out there has very high flicker rates. They're not really medical grade red light panels, and this is medicine, in my opinion. The sun is medicine.
Awesome. I guess we can talk about any specific brands or specific places where people can just point and click and go get them instead of having to look for different characteristics, right? For those who just want to go purchase one that perhaps we use or recommend. But yeah, we tied in circadian rhythm with having proper sleep cycles, red light. So let's think about your possible just normie, right, out in the Western world, someone who is on a typical Western diet, who is looking to make a change and possibly get healthy. Obviously their circadian rhythm is trashed. bad diet, no sunlight. So
And here's the thing, Nate, everything in everybody nowadays has a pretty much that's not aware of this has a trash circadian rhythm by default. Every single one of us, because we are supposed to be exposed to candlelight more so than 3,000 or 5,000 Kelvin light, which emits a lot of blue light. And there's a chart for that out there as well. So when you turn on your LED lights that save you all kinds of money, on your bill at night, your brain resets to it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. That's already impacting the circadian rhythm. That's the big thing with blue light. That's why if sometimes you start watching a movie late at night, you're not sleepy. If you're watching it on a TV, it's blue light. All computer monitors, blue light. Your phone, blue light, in high concentrations. So yeah, it's this we all have trash circadian rhythms to start off with, which then in turn causes trash metabolic syndromes, because obviously your hormones are all fucked up.
The scary part to all this is that I look back on days that I was in college, right? Circadian rhythm's definitely trash, but I wasn't even aware of it, and there were no signs that pointed me towards like, hey, like something's off. So, like, how does one kind of become aware of this? Because it seems that people still live their day-to-day lives with a trash circadian rhythm.
Yeah, you're correct. You live your day-to-day life, but it gets to a point where you can't get up, you're depressed, life sucks, you start suffering from erectile dysfunction when you get older, you start having high blood pressure, you start
psoriasis.
having all the symptoms that you will go to a regular doctor, and nothing wrong with doctors. I just believe that when there's things, once again, when there's biases for profit, it takes a long time for the industry to completely pivot and turn around, and obviously when there's big interest in things, it just takes a very long time for the populace to catch up to what's actually happening, including doctors. Doctors are as human as you and I, and they need to adhere to certain laws that are put in place. Not that those laws are very, are bad or are intentionally put in place, but that's just a problem that it is what it is. It all comes back to taking personal responsibility. If you don't feel right, you should seek for the answers. You shouldn't just believe what one person tells you, including me. This is why individualized approach is going to be the future, in my opinion, of everything.
Right. So the mandatory disclaimers, right? Contact your physician, talk to your doctor. Don't ever implement a radical change in your life or diet without talking to someone, right? But this is all stuff we've seen help us and benefit us, so we can speak from experience,
Correct. Yeah. We're 5 different gentlemen that are from 5 different backgrounds. And all we care about is we let the truth guide our way, with coupled with results. And if we could offer that to you guys listening in, then that's great, because you guys will reap the benefits. And I believe that a healthier planet is a healthier person, and a healthier person makes a happier planet altogether.
And definitely a healthier future moving forward as well, because as you can see, there's the real epidemic or pandemic, however you want to call it, is men now today have, I believe it was 40 to 50% less testosterone than they did, let's say, back in the 50s. And, we've made so many advances technology-wise, but then as humans, we seem to have taken a step backwards.
And the interesting thing about what you mentioned, Julio, is that let's say that you start taking testosterone because that's what's vogue or what everybody is doing, and you still haven't addressed your circadian rhythm issue. You're just possibly, the way the body works is it's like plumbing. It's very complicated plumbing, and a lot of stuff that we still don't understand. And you're a doctor, and I'm sure you could agree with this. It's just very complicated. When you overdo it in one area, something breaks somewhere else. And
Exactly.
when you
So,
do
and
it-
Yeah, the body's full of is full of negative and feedback loops that where if you mess one thing up, the other thing will, yeah, 100%.
and that's why I think that it's always important to go to the root cause of the issue. And then from there, you either add on monitoring to see what's going on. I'm not against supplementation, but I believe that you should definitely try to get to the root issue. And if the root issue happens to be poor sleep and bad lighting and bad circadian rhythm to start off with, start with that. And that's something that's very applicable and anybody could do.
exactly.
You don't need to do anything, but just get your sleep cycle right and then see how that is.
Exactly. Root cause analysis, because what happens with testosterone injections, you get this negative feedback, which pretty much your body, what you do is your body forgets on how to make its own.
Correct.
So that brings its own
Correct.
side effects. Now the bodybuilders, they just abused of it. They put too much. Also, maybe the quality of the testosterone. But if you don't, again, like you said, if you don't address like your sleep, your circadian rhythm, your exposure to light, avoiding or trying to minimize your blue light exposure, you're basically gonna, you might fix one hormone issue, but then everything else, there's something that's gonna get messed up along the line, and it's probably worse than let alone the testosterone.
Well, I gotta find the statistic, man, but I heard that like I think 83% of people in the US have some form of metabolic damage. That's a staggering. I mean, it's not even 40% or 50 or 60. We're like 80 something, 83 or 86%.
Yeah, we're probably cracking 90. We're probably cracking 90 as
so it's like, and everybody does different diets and everybody tries different things. And, some people thrive on veganism, some people thrive on carnivore, some people thrive on this, thrive on that. But at the end of the day, nobody's really talking about this light issue. And I just don't, it makes so much sense that if there's anything that lets you know, okay, the day has just begun, is the sunrise. And the
also,
day ended, sunset. I mean, like
exactly.
it's really
even giving birth. What is the term in Spanish? Dar luz.
Dar luz.
Give life. So
correct.
Essentially, we need more. In fact, after we're done here, I'm gonna go to the beach. It's a sunny day for the most part. I'm gonna get some sun, like just a nice little walk around. And I've noticed also, since I work in a very closed off place, I go outside to walk the dog here or there, and I've noticed a lot of changes just by implementing that little 5-minute walk 2-3 times during the day.
Correct.
I don't walk out of the tail.
The sun is very important, and the red light panels just tie it all together and give it to you in high dose, what we've been starving for so long. It's free, and I repeat this again, it's free to get up in the morning with the sun rising and expose yourself as much as feasible within the right time, so you can produce your vitamin D, another free B that
exactly.
don't have to sell you anything on. And see how that impacts your sleep, another freebie. And once you start getting all these freebies, all of a sudden you start becoming more mentally clear. And your decisions will just be better because you're more in sync with circadian rhythm, or more in sync with Mother Nature or Earth, or just the way things are supposed to be.
How much time should we expose ourselves to sun? And like, what's the best time frame to do so?
So there is an app called D Miner that I recommend everyone download, because it's going to give you a specific time frame of when the sun is actually secreting the correct UVB lights to produce vitamin D. Because if the sun's out, it doesn't mean that the sun is constantly secreting vitamin D at all hours.
Right. So let's say it's 4 p.m. and the sun is nice and hot. Are we benefiting from that sunlight?
I believe you always benefit from the sunlight. I also believe that you shouldn't constantly expose yourself to the sunlight all day. There is something called what's the name of this, man?
Well, there's the point of diminishing returns where the ROI of being out there.
As in everything, Nate.
Yeah, there is a sweet spot. There's a sweet spot. And
I think the later.
So you want to build your solar callus on your skin. Once you start, so it's pretty much like anything. You start, it's like when you season a cast iron a skillet or anything that you have to season, you got to build it up slowly but surely with high heat. Your skin's the same way. You don't want to go out there and sit on the sun for 4 hours, exposing yourself to the naked sun without, having some form of like buildup to it. So you want to
just how you wouldn't want to jump into a marathon right away. You'd start with half a mile, 1 mile. Like when you're first starting out in the sun, do 10, 15 minutes, build it up to 20, 30. In my experience, I haven't had to do more than 45 to 60 minutes. I think that's enough. If you look at one of the greatest soccer players in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo, he even says 30 minutes a day. That's all you need.
100%. And then once again, I want to add, guys, one of the most important things here, we're not trying to sell you on what's the best way because it works for us. We just want to kind of point you in the right direction so you start implementing so many things so you can start figuring out what works for you. If 45 minutes works for you, great. If 15 minutes work for you, great. How you feel is going to determine what's really working for you.
Yeah.
And it's individualized medicine. And we just
want to nudge people in the right direction.
We're distilling the plethora of marketing to try to get to the bottom of the barrel as best as we can to use this information for ourselves to make sure it works, to give it back to the listener as a way to possibly help them help themselves. But ultimately, it comes down to you helping yourself.
Yes, we place a heavy emphasis on you being the scientist. You have to be the one that conducts the experiments. Just how we learned the scientific method as kids. It starts with a question, and then it leads to a hypothesis. You run the test or the experiment yourself, and then you analyze, which is like, how did you feel? And then you go from there. You make the necessary adjustments, and then you reach the place that you want to be mentally.
Personal responsibility is the name of the game. So fasting, it's a whole other rabbit hole that is so beautifully interesting. And I don't even think that the science will ever catch up with all the amount of benefits that are happening in the body. And just to tie this into what we just finished saying, it happens to be free. So a lot of the things that we're talking about here is pretty much already provided by nature in some sort of way. And when I hear myself speaking like this, sometimes it's funny even to me because I've never been much of a tree hugger or anything like that. But things give you results. It is what it is. They give you results. So you have to pivot your mental hypothesis on the fact that something works.
Some of us are even fasting right now, by the way.
Yes.
I believe Yaz and Nathan are both fasting right now. If you guys want to talk about how you feel right now, because that's as real as it gets.
Yeah, I'm 43 hours in and I feel great. No appetite, no hunger pangs. We can talk about like hacks and ways to maintain and not give in to your hunger pangs later. But yeah, I'm 43 hours in. I use the Zero app, which is available on Android and iOS. It's free. It's a convenient little timer you can use to track your timing. And yeah, planning on fasting all weekend and reaping the benefits.
So what are these benefits that you've noticed so far?
So I'll let Yaz talk about some of it, but some of the benefits I've seen are.
Again, you got the mic. I've had the mic. The mic is yours, brother.
The mic is mine. So, and again, right, this is where we say you talk to your doctor. Don't go fasting for 7 days, right, and starve yourself, and then you have a hypoglycemic or ketoacidosis attack because you're a typical Westerner who's unhealthy, right? Talk to your doctor first, but at least in my case.
And ketoacidosis, Nate, I want to add, because I'm very familiar with ketoacidosis. And this is something you get when you just Google regular stuff on the internet. Ketoacidosis only applies when you're a diabetic. If you're a diabetic, then you do run the risk of going ketoacidosis. You do not run the risk of going ketoacidosis.
Especially type 1. Type 1, these are the ones that inject insulin. They don't produce insulin.
So
So-
They
so-
are the most at risk for
so-
ketoacidosis.
So
Correct.
a type 1 is someone who's popping insulin every day, correct?
Correct.
Not popping, injecting,
pancreas is
injecting.
done.
brother.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. So if you're injecting insulin every day, then buyer beware, be careful. All the warnings apply. Right?
Do not engage in a 22-day fast is my recommendation.
Correct.
Type
Yeah.
2s, I would also proceed with caution.
Type
Yeah, I mean,
type
if
2
you're type,
type 2 diabetics that are on metformin or any other of the famously known diabetic drugs or even some insulin, they will go hypoglycemic, but you break the fast with fat. You eat something fat bound. If you're type 2, you usually reverse your type 2 in 2 to 3 weeks. Obviously, this depends on how old you are, how severe it is. If you're about to go type 1 from type 2, they're now, by the way, I do want to add, they're now calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes for those who are not familiar with the, which is just very interesting to me because it all comes back to this metabolic damage that everybody has, and it don't really matter what diet you're on. Like everybody could develop metabolic damage, and I always ask myself the question: could it really just be all the life? Obviously, lifestyle choices and food that you eat impact this, but I think it would impact less if you have a body that's functioning. Because at the end of the day, the body is a survival machinery. It's put here to thrive and survive. So, yeah.
Going back to Nathan, you said 43 hours in, and you don't have much of you don't have much of an appetite.
I don't. And I make sure I drink water with electrolytes, right, to make sure that I'm hydrated. One of the mistakes a lot of people make is they drink a lot of water during fast, but it's not hydrating them. It's actually pulling out electrolytes when they urinate. So this leads to crankiness.
That's another rabbit hole in and of itself too. What is real hydration? But yes, Nate, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, when you start fasting, your body goes into a diurese state. You start diuresing yourself. Your body starts dumping urine a lot, and with that goes your minerals, and that usually tends to deplete electrolytes. Or when there's any toxins in your body, for example, I remember when my mom first got chemotherapy, she ended up in the hospital with almost organ failure because the body was trying to get rid of that chemo poison, and the intensive urination severely depleted all her minerals, and we didn't know. So I found her in a diluted state, and once you see someone that's like in a state of delirium, they're pretty much, it means the Wi-Fi, these electrolytes control the Wi-Fi system in the body, and once these salts are not in the body, your body starts losing connectivity to itself. So she ended up in the hospital with very low potassium, and usually your body starts shutting down organ by organ when that's the situation. So you will get muscle cramps, you will feel horrible. But all this could be avoided if you drink the appropriate concoction of electrolytes during your fast. Yes. Continue, Nate.
Well, yeah. So, I was talking about just staying hydrated, and of course, the further rabbit hole of biohacks and compounds, that there's lots of compounds and drugs and stuff, and we won't even touch on those, right? Things that you can take that will sort of enhance your fasting experience. So you can further suppress appetite regardless if you're fasting or not, but we could talk about those another day. But some of the obvious benefits of fasting, right? I mean, I think we were talking about the illustration of how fasting is sort of like servicing the factory itself, right? So you have a factory that's pumping out products. So essentially, when you're fasting, you're shutting down the production, which means you're not eating, right? And you're allowing your body the chance to do a deep cleaning and a deep sort of detox of itself, which is something
a real detox.
chance to do. Yeah. exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, if one of you guys wants to talk about like what kind of detox happens, or specifically like what your body is doing, and of course dispel some of the myths, right? Because one of the myths of fasting is, oh well, you can't fast for too long because you're going to start going into a catabolic state. You're going to start burning muscle, and you know, there's lots of research out there where that shows that's BS. We know that fasting will use once you're in ketosis and your muscle glycogen is burned up, right, and used, which usually happens around 18 to 20 hours later, then that's the holy grail, because that means your body is now using your fat stores, which means you're in ketosis, right? And there's ways to test for ketosis, and there's the sticks and whatnot, but that's the holy grail, right? Which is you're burning fat. For a lot of us, we're trying to get into better shape or dial in our shape. And you know, for you to lose muscle during a fast, it's like very, very hard. Like you have to be like super diced already. You got to be like 5% body fat. And I mean, it's like a very, very specific scenario. So it's almost a myth, right? 90% of the population has a little stubborn fat, has a belly.
It's downright impossible. It's downright impossible to do that, man. Honestly.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So that's
So,
what I want to
so
say.
here's the thing from what I understand on the scientific perspective, my limited understanding of it. The reason why you don't lose muscle is because your body starts secreting huge amounts, 1,500 to 2,000% human growth hormone. And this is a very scientifically rooted fact. You do not lose muscle when, and there's all kinds of arguments out there with, you know, in the fitness world. No, you fasting is the worst. You this, you that. I believe they're just afraid of losing the gains, because everybody knows it's hard to put on muscle, and it's only hard because you got to put in the work. But there's actually videos that we could link to and show of women gaining muscle on a fast, on a 10-day and more fast. They actually at the end ended up with 0.5 or 0.8 more muscle than they did when they started without working out. So the human growth hormone, which is the most reparative hormone, or one of the most reparative hormones in the body, secretes. Now you got to kind of think about this from evolution standpoint. If you're starving, which is technically what's happening when you're fasting, your body, which is another reason why a lot of people report feeling very elated mentally, because your body is also now using your ketones for fuel, which is the other form of fuel that the brain uses. We use glucose, which the brain prefers, and then we use ketones. Ketones is stored in fat. This is why people usually gain weight. People who are overweight, that's not a bad thing. The body's doing that for survival purposes automatically. Problem is you don't have any metabolic flexibility because you're always eating and there's an abundance of food everywhere. So you're constantly storing more and more and more. And it gets to a point, and this point is very different for everybody, where you do reach a point of diminishing returns like sunlight. See, everything here could usually be lateral to everything. So you eat, and then you start becoming what's called insulin resistant, or AKA metabolic damage, some form of metabolic damage. And this is different for everybody, because there's guys that could be 500 pounds and be healthier than a guy that's 180 pounds, shredded. It doesn't mean that one guy is healthier than the other. As crazy as that sounds, the shredded guy could have a heart attack because he's just eating food that he doesn't understand that he has metabolic damage now. So metabolic flexibility is very important, and fasting is the holy grail of that, because it makes your body, once, as Nathan referred to, deplete your glycogen stores, mainly in the liver, then in your muscles, and depletes all your glycogen stores. You have access to now all this fat, and that gives you metabolic flexibility. Now, it just happens to be that for some reason, we all know that if we go to the gym and we work out, you have to tear the muscle in order for it to repair and become bigger. Same thing happens when you're fasting. The body goes into also at about maybe, I think that last I heard is 3 to 5 days, it goes into a state of autophagy. And autophagy is a state of, the word in Greek means to self-eat, to self-eat. So what the body starts doing is it starts going into the cell, and the Nobel Prize was giving out to a gentleman in 2016 for this, that could be linked or further research. It starts eating all the gunk or all the trash in the cell and taking it out, which is perhaps another reason why we urinate so much and have diarrhea bouts and have all these kind of things that usually could pop up during a fast. So autophagy is an amazing, I mean, I think we're just the tip of the iceberg here on the benefits of what is really happening when you fast. I'm not an overly religious person, but I will add that all religions are completely against each other and they all fight. They all have the one God, they agree on that, but they all have different names and different backgrounds and different rules. But the one thing all religious institutions agree on is fasting. So, I mean, that's good enough for me to take it and run with it and see what happens. Yeah, it's pretty amazing what is happening in the body. And I mean, we could get into all kinds of things that are known, but it's just amazing to witness it, feel it, and get all the benefits from a fast. It's just, to me, is one of the best things. And once again, there's no supplement that I could sell you. All you have to do is stop doing everything and take time for yourself. Electrolytes.
Yeah.
So we've been touching on the physical aspects on fasting. Let's dive into the mental now, because I'll just leave it to the G's that are fasting right now. How do you feel mentally? Like what's going on? What's going on inside that brain of yours?
So there is a massive amount of clarity you get after X amount of hours of fasting, right? And I'll credit a lot of the research I've read from Huberman and Jay Campbell, talking about how brain-derived nootropic factor, BDNF, is something that the brain secretes when you're fasting for X amount of hours. And that's when you hit that clarity zone. I'm sure anyone who's fasted 18, 20 plus hours, after you sort of get through that rough patch of burning your glycogen stores and fighting off the hunger pangs, you reach this point where you're like in the zone and you feel clarity, you feel zero appetite, zero hunger. That's the BDNF being secreted by your brain. And so I've found that I have my most clear moments of clarity and focus when I'm 18, 20 hours into a fast. Of course, once you're 40, 50, 60 hours into a fast, a few days into a fast, there's different levels and different experiences you can have, right? In terms of clarity and just facing that man in the mirror, right? Facing your inner struggles and your inner, let's say your inner demons, right? Because at the end of the day, those struggles that you're having are, I want to reach for that banana, I want to reach for that phone and grab Uber Eats, right? Or I want to have a coffee already, right? I'm tired of fasting. So the longer you go in a fast, the more self-control you have to exert, right? The more mental control you have to exert, because at the end of the day, once you have full control of that voice, and the longer the fast goes, that's the longer the fast goes, that's how you start to face yourself with that voice, right? And dominate it and own it. Whereas if you give in, then who's really in control, right? So I feel like you start to have a really good exercise in self-control the longer the fast goes. So that's kind of my experience.
Yeah, the mental part of the fast is so huge, because you're technically fighting, or in my experience, you're fighting the voice that's always getting you to stop or not pursue or not approach that girl, or eat that extra piece of pie or chocolate bar or pizza. You're coming face to face with that. And the fact that you actually get to decide or dictate or you know, stop yourself from doing this for an extended point of time is, in my opinion, the best way to create control and discipline within yourself. And then to not only prove to yourself that you're not going to die and that the mind's just overly paranoid in getting you to eat, it's definitely a huge part of creating a resilient mindset, which is very important, very much needed to navigate, you know, when the flood does appear in your life, or the struggle, or the problem, or your wife leaves you, or the girl leaves you. The voices will always come at you with, "Oh, you see, and now, and you," and fasting puts you face to face with that. There's all kinds of scientific backing as what's going on. I like to take the simplistic approach, and it's like you facing yourself and proving to yourself that nothing's going to happen to you, and you continue to push through.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I mean, if you just think about just the modern Western world, the modern Western diet, without going too in depth, right? How easy it is for us to get food these days, right? You know, you can pick up your phone and have Uber Eats deliver you any type of trash food in 30 minutes, right? The fridge is full of food. I don't believe in evolution, but you can think about our ancestors, right? They had to struggle for food in ways we do not, right? And so food is way accessible these days. It's too easy to get food. The food is low quality. It's high in calories, high in fat, high in salt, low in nutrients. And that's a whole rabbit hole of chemicals in the food and trash in the water. I mean, there's the whole rabbit hole. But again, it's too easy to eat that nowadays, right? And if you're poor, it's easier to eat cheap food. It's actually, I can go to the store and buy a bunch of cheap brownies and go to dollar menu at McDonald's, and I can survive, quote unquote, right? With very, very
Yeah, that's a big thing. There's a dollar menu, but then the salad is $12, but then the cheeseburgers are 50 cents a pop.
right.
Again, a whole other rabbit hole in and of itself, but it's readily, I would say, feasible to eat cheap as opposed to actually, you know,
Right.
cleaning up your diet. Well, they made it seem that way, at least society.
So it's more expensive to eat healthy, but regardless of that, right? Let's not even go down that rabbit hole right now. If you think about how easy it is for us to eat now, right? This is another reason why fasting is so fascinating, because obviously it costs zero, right? Fasting is not miraculous. You're just not eating, right? But it's this revolutionary concept because we're so easy to have. We're so used to having easy access to food these days. It's too easy, right? And so going in the opposite direction, fasting aggressively, and then of course we could talk about fasting schedules for beginners and more advanced fasting windows, right? You know, how to get started on fasting. But it's fascinating when you take it the other direction. Fasting and fasting for health and aggressive fasting windows, once you're more in the advanced side of things, it really is being a maverick when you think about what everyone is doing these days, which is stuffing their face. And so the simplicity of fasting is beautiful. However, the yin and yang, right? The opposite side of that coin is you're not going to fast consistently or for long windows if you let your inner bitch essentially talk you out of it. And so that's the struggle with fasting. It's simple as a concept, but very difficult to execute on a regular basis. And for those of us looking to get a lot of the more advanced low-level benefits of fasting, getting into those longer windows, right? Which is 24-hour plus fast. And so fascinating stuff for sure.